Hi, Dan. Yeah, usually we have a few stragglers who come in, 5 to 10 minutes late while they gather all this stuff. But thank you for joining us. We'll begin shortly. We're just gonna give everybody about 5 minutes. As you can see, more people are joining in now. Now we had about 20 people confirm they were gonna come, so we're just gonna give about 5 minutes before everyone gets in. Alright, so for those of us who are just joining now, please do me a favor. Go ahead and in the chat on the right hand side, just state your name, say hello, and we're just going to give people a few minutes to join us. We're going to begin this thing at around 11:40. Sorry, what I'm saying. 11:35. I see 14 people watching now. So for those 14 people watching us, excluding Dan, if you could just go ahead on the right-hand side where the chat is, just state your name, say hello, just so we know who's here. Yeah, sorry, I went silent now. I'm just waiting for people to come in. We're going to begin at 11:35, so 2 minutes. Yeah, didn't really mention it, but I guess if in order to chat, you need to actually sign in to YouTube. TDSB accounts actually were all Gmail enabled, so you can actually sign in using your TDSB credentials, and it'll actually already populate your first and last name. Hello, John. So we're just going to begin at 11:35, John. We're just waiting for people to come in. Oh, I haven't heard of that, Dan. We're going to have to test that out. You had to create a YouTube channel? I thought, interesting. Really? Okay. You had to create a channel. I'm going to take that away for the next one just so we can actually iron out what exactly is happening on the user's end so we can get a rough idea what it's like to actually join into this webinar. Okay, well, the time is, oh, hi, Tracy from Woburn. Up and running with 147 iPads, wow. Okay, well, hopefully this is fruitful for you because we're going to be covering a lot of stuff here. And given that it's 11:35, hi Christopher Allen, Swansea, beautiful. I'm going to begin the webinar now, just because I know you guys are probably very busy and you probably want to get back to work. So, Kevin, click the link. I was brought directly onto the YouTube channel and given the username mgfranklin100. Huh. Okay, MG Franklin 100. What's your first and last name? And I guess what school are you in? Everyone has to create a channel. Okay. So I have somebody actually fielding the chat right now. So I'm going to begin with the webinar. And my associate here is going to be communicating with you guys over chat to sort of get a perspective of what you guys are saying in there. And any quick questions that you guys have, she'll be answering within the chat. And then, of course, there's also a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. But for now, let's begin. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the AirWatch webinar. My name is Brandon, and to the left of me, with no voice presence, is my associate, Israt. She'll be fielding the chat with any questions. Now, I've been with the client service desk for about 2 years now, and we're recently took on this role of trying to do these AirWatch webinars where we can actually get schools caught up, because it is kind of a big turning point within the organization for managing these iPads. So we felt the need to actually do these sort of every week. We're going to be holding these webinars weekly just to get everyone accustomed with the AirWatch product and how you can use it at your school. So before we begin, some important notes. The webinar is actually being recorded. So the link at the top that you guys are using right now will be the same link you'll be using if you actually want to go back and watch the video again. And it's all DVR'd, so you can actually skip back even during the live feed, although we do recommend that, and I'll explain that shortly. Another thing to note is there is about a 10-second delay between the time that something comes out of my mouth and by the time I read your question, by the time you hear me. So if I don't address something that you've said in the chat, or it doesn't appear that I'm addressing it right away, it's probably due to that 10-second delay. But I do have Israt over here fielding the chat for any quick questions. So if there's a question that she can answer just through typing it out, she will go ahead and type out the answer for you. And anything that seems to be more complex, what we're going to do is she'll tell you that we're going to hold that question until the end. And if you want to stick around and find out the answer to that or watch the video later, because again, it's being recorded, you'll be able to do so. And we'll have a more detailed response of how to go about doing something with whatever that question is. And also, if you're finding the quality is a little bit too low, maybe the text is unreadable, you may want to adjust the quality settings on YouTube. So in the bottom right-hand side, if you hover your mouse over the YouTube window, there will be a little gear icon. And if you click that gear icon, you'll see there's a little sub-menu there that says quality. You may want to change that to 720p or 1080p, and those are like the high-definition sort of ones. The caveat to that, though, is, of course, it kind of slows down the webinar, but I think you shouldn't really have too much of a problem with that. So you may want to adjust the quality settings there. So yeah, you'll see the two options there, 720p and 1080p. It should be set to automatically, so it'll kind of fluctuate depending on your network speed. But if you want to force it to use the highest quality, you can change between 720p and 1080p. I think 720p is fine, but if you want full HD 1080p, feel free. And also at the bottom, next to the volume control, directly to the right of it, there's a little icon there that says live. And if the dot is gray, that means that the video is actually not as live as it can possibly be. So there's sort of like a DVR feature here where the video can be played back. So if you click the live button, you'll see it'll go red. And once it's red, you'll know you're at the most livest possible of the webinar. So with that, let's jump right in. Let's talk about the objectives of this webinar. The objectives here are to familiarize schools with AirWatch and managing iPads. We're going to tend to highlight the key benefits of AirWatch, and as well as demonstrate how you will be using AirWatch at your school. So more real world scenarios of how you'll go about using AirWatch to manage your iPads. So what is it? What is AirWatch? Well, AirWatch is a mobile device management system, or in brackets MDM, or an enterprise mobility management system. Those are just fancy words, but they both refer to the same thing. It is a centralized point for managing your iPads. So AirWatch will essentially allow you to easily manage your mobile devices, or in our case, we're dealing mostly with iPads for now, from a single web-based application, which should simplify the setup and management process for new iPads and existing iPads. AirWatch could also be referred to as Enterprise Management System or Mobile Device Management System. The terms are actually interchangeable. They mean the exact same thing. So if you hear me use MDM at one point or EMM at another, just note they mean the exact same thing. It's just some sort of weird industry term that is kind of floating between the two of them. So what are the benefits? The benefits for the TDSB when it comes to AirWatch, the most, I think, top one here I see here is automatic TDSB wireless network access. So I think one of the biggest headaches and one of the largest volume of calls that we were getting regarding iPads was how to get them joined into Wi-Fi. With AirWatch, they will be joining the network WLAN TDSB01, which is the same one you use with laptops or any TDSB-owned device, and that works over basically a certificate, so you don't need to actually authenticate. So with AirWatch, they will automatically join the WLAN TDSB01, no more typing in passwords to get on the Wi-Fi. There's also easy app installation for multiple iPads, so if you have a bunch of iPads and you want them all to have the same look or feel or the same apps installed on them, we can actually kind of choose our bulk of apps that we want deployed to an iPad and push them out to all of them in one single go. There's also a consistent experience between the iPads, so you'll notice on all the iPads there's the blue background, and as well as on the lock screen, they'll have the lovely TDSB logo here. So they all have the same look and feel as far as the iPads go. Sorry, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint. There we go. There's also built-in security policies, which are intended to prevent students from adding or removing apps, or applying passcodes to the device, or locking and disabling the device as a result of putting a passcode on the device. So one of the calls we get a lot is a student will have picked up the iPad. They will either install Angry Birds when they weren't supposed to, or what they'll do is they'll go into settings and then put a passcode on the device and not tell anyone what the passcode is. And then when they hand it back to the teacher has no idea what the passcode is, and when they try to guess it, it actually locks or disables the device. So with AirWatch, inherently, it actually has that feature disabled. And you can turn it off and on, which we'll get into during the webinar. But the idea is there's sort of a protection mechanism out of the box when it comes to AirWatch from preventing students from messing with the iPads, if you will. And remote configuration updates, and I have in brackets there wireless. When I say remote, I mean that it's all handled over wireless. So no more will we need to use, I don't know if you've ever had the luxury of using Apple Configurator or iTunes to configure your iPad. You have to plug it into a computer, open up iTunes, find the app, and it's a nightmare. So with AirWatch, everything will be done wirelessly. So we'll configure iPads from a single point, and it'll push out all the apps and all the configurations wirelessly. And also, there is no more requirement for the Apple IDs. So this was another big one that we were getting a lot of calls about. We had basically created an Apple ID for every single school, and there was a default password, and sometimes somebody would change it, and then who didn't know the Apple ID, and then it was a nightmare to try to manage those passwords for those Apple IDs. And that was one of the requirements in order for you to install something from the App Store. So now we no longer have we won't need the Apple ID with AirWatch. So you won't have to sign into Apple ID with every device. You won't have to remember or share the password amongst the school. All your purchased apps and any free apps will actually be in AirWatch, and any previous apps that were purchased under the Mobile G account will actually should be already migrated over to AirWatch, which we will get into later. So, who can log in? By default, principals and AirWatch administrators. AirWatch administrators are basically users who have been volunteered or voluntold by the principal to manage the AirWatch environment. So AirWatch administrators can be added into AirWatch using LAS, which is the local administration system that's found in the school folder on your desktop. So your principal can go in, add you in, and everyone here, prior to joining this webinar, we actually made a requirement that we wanted to add you guys in as AirWatch administrators. So you should all already be AirWatch administrators at this point. So it could take up to 12 to 24 hours in order for the administrator to have access to the console. So once we add you in LAS, it's about 12 to 24 hours for that to synchronize from our system over to AirWatch. So if you've just got added in and you're not able to log in right away, that's more than likely the reason why. Alright, so this demo will cover navigating the AirWatch console. We're going to be organizing our iPads using what the product refers to as smart groups. And then we're going to be adding, removing apps and web clips to the iPads. And web clips essentially are just like shortcuts, similar to like a shortcut to a page on the internet. And you can put those on the iPad as well. So we're going to go over how to do that there in the demo. With that, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into logging in. So logging into AirWatch can actually be done from anywhere on the web, not just within the Toronto District School Board walls. The AirWatch product is on the internet. It's a cloud-based service. There is no browser limitation. It shouldn't matter whether you're using Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox. It should work on all browsers. One important thing to note when you're logging in is your username. It needs to be in a certain format. So one of the requirements is that you need to prefix your username, or your employee number in this case, with TDSB \. The TDSB part isn't case sensitive, so don't worry about that. But as long as you have TDSB \, your employee number, and then your current network password, you should be able to log in. Now, when you're logging in for the first time, there is a little pop-up that comes up telling you to create a 4-digit PIN code on first login. The 4-digit PIN code essentially is used for verifying certain tasks. So just as a quick example, if you wanted to wipe a device, to prevent you from accidentally clicking that wipe device feature, it would ask you to type in your 4-digit PIN code as like a last-minute confirmation so that you don't accidentally wipe a device. So there's certain parts in the console that'll ask you for that 4-digit PIN, and usually they're more aggressive tasks like wiping a device or something to that effect. And the link for AirWatch is actually right there. It's kind of a mouthful, cn239.awmdm.com. I'm hoping they're going to change that to something more friendly in the future, but for now that's the link that we have. The link is right there. It's also in the comments section at the bottom of this stream. So if you wanted to, in a new window or in another browser tab, open it up and sort of play around as we're going along with the webinar, feel free to do so. And oh, what happened there? 1 second. So, that's the accept terms of agreement. So, with that, I'm actually going to log in right now, and I got it right here. So this is the AirWatch console, again, cn239.awmdm.com, as we can see up here at the top. And like I said, in order to log into the console, we do need to prefix our username, or in this case, their username is our employee number, with TDSB and then a \. Now, the TDSB is not case sensitive. You can do it in all lowercase. You can do it in all uppercase. It doesn't matter. You can even do T, D, S, and B like that. And then you could enter in your employee number. Oops. And then your password, which is your current network password. So this is the same one you use to log in a computer or check your emails. It's the same password as it is for AirWatch. So I'm going to go ahead and type mine in here. Oops. And after we log in, this is the first screen we will see. Actually, sorry, no, it's not the first screen we'll see. You might be seeing something different if this is the first time you're logging in. So I'm just going to jump back over to the PowerPoint because I took a screenshot just so you guys can see. This is probably what you're seeing if this is the first time you log in. It's going to ask you to accept the terms of agreement. If you want to read it, go ahead. It's a mouthful, but feel free to just click accept if you want. And then secondly, what you'll see is this 4-digit PIN creation screen that I was referring to. So the 4-digit PIN, like I said, is used for additional confirmation before doing certain tasks. So you'll create a little 4-digit PIN that you can use for different parts of the AirWatch console. Set it now to something meaningful. Don't choose your PIN number that you use for your bank account, but set it to something that you can remember. Now, if you forget your PIN code later on down the road, for now, you can contact the client service desk, which is us, and we will be able to assist you with resetting it. But you do have the ability to reset your PIN code from the AirWatch console, which I think we were having some issues with it before, but I think it might be addressed now. You should be able to reset your PIN from the AirWatch console. Oops. Now I'm going to switch back to the AirWatch console here. And so here it is. Once you've gone past the accept the terms of agreement as well as creating the 4-digit PIN code, this should be the sort of the first thing you see. And this is essentially the dashboard. And the dashboard is sort of a high-level overview of your school's AirWatch environment. But during this webinar, we're actually going to cover all the different portions of the AirWatch console. The 3 key points are over here on the left-hand side. There's devices, apps and books, groups and settings. And each one of those icons refers to exactly what they're referring to. In devices, you're going to get a list and the ability to manage your devices. In apps and books, you're going to see your apps and books. And for groups and settings, that's where we will see all of our smart groups that I was referring to earlier. And that's how you're going to group your iPads in a logical group so that you can manage them or choose a set of apps that you want to deploy specifically to a whole entire group of iPads. But we'll start off right now under Devices and Dashboard. This is the landing page. And as I said earlier, just basically gives you a high-level overview of your school's AirWatch environment. It contains statistical information regarding the device makeup of your environment. As you can see here, just by looking here, I can see under total deployment, I got 3. That tells me that in my school environment, I have 3 devices that are currently enrolled or talking to, communicating with, associated with AirWatch. And of those 3 devices, it breaks down into more granular statistics down here. So some of the more useful ones you might find yourself seeing is just under security, you got no passcode. So I can see here that 67% of my devices have no passcode associated with them. And then you see there's 2 down there that have no passcode, and that's how that number comes out to 67%. There is also the last seen. This is actually a pretty useful one here. Last seen breakdown will actually tell you when it is that the device was last checked in or when it last reported into AirWatch. So usually when it goes offline, it's not talking to AirWatch, and then when it's online, it says, "Hi AirWatch, I'm here and I'm alive." And this shows you after how many days a device is not checked into AirWatch or communicated to AirWatch that it's alive or connected. So devices that have not been seen basically in a while could suggest that the device may be missing or stolen, or perhaps the device is broken. So and one of the great features of the dashboard is that all these statistics are essentially clickable. You can go into each one and delve into it. So if I wanted to see the devices that it's referring to, so it shows here that some of the 3 devices have been seen in the last 0 to 3 days. I could actually, if I hover my mouse over it, you'll see that it kind of changes color. I can click that, and what it'll do is it'll take me to a view or a list of devices that statistic was referring to. So it brought me over to list view on the side here, and then it actually implied a filter over here that shows last seen for 0 to 3 days. So these are the 3 devices that it was referring to. We can see based on this last seen value here that they all sort of fall under that category of being seen. So this one's 25 minutes, this one's 2 hours, and this one's 1 day. So all within that 0 to 3 day rule. I'm just going to hop back over to the dashboard. So that was the last seen. There's some more statistics down here. Platforms, it'll show you the makeup. In this case, we actually have 1 Android device enrolled in our AirWatch environment. In the future, actually, AirWatch will be opening up to our Samsung tabs that will be available in the price book. But for now, we're more concerned with iPads because we already have so many of them in our environment. But when that comes to time, we can see that it'll be a platform breakdown. How many Android devices do I have? How many Apple iOS devices do I have? There's also the operating system breakdown. This may be useful if you want your operating system to be on a certain date. So more often than not, you want to be on the latest and greatest version of iOS. So certain apps will require that the iPad is on the latest version of iOS, which right now is 10.2. And I can see here, if I wanted to see what of my devices require an update, I can see one here is at 10.1, and I could use this graph to sort of delve in, find out what device that is that is referring to that has 10.1, and update it through the AirWatch console. So we already kind of briefly saw list view, and I'm going to actually go over to list view, which is down over here on the left hand side. When I clicked these graphs, it brought me over to list view, but what it did is it brought me over to list view, but it put a filter, and the filter was basically just so that it meets up with the statistics from the dashboard. So when I click the interactivity features of the dashboard, it applies the filter that it's referring to. But if I want to switch over to list view without a filter, I can actually just click list view over here on the left hand side, and it's going to just show me literally all the devices that are in my AirWatch environment or that are enrolled into AirWatch. So when you're first looking at list view, it sort of just provides a quick glance at the features or sorry, the makeup of your devices. We can see here on the first column that there is last seen, and that was sort of what I was referring to earlier when I was saying that devices will report in, or they'll check in AirWatch. They'll when they're online, they'll communicate with AirWatch, and this value is reflected here. So this one, for example, had checked into AirWatch 27 minutes ago, and this one 2 hours ago, denominated by the H there, and in this case 1 day ago. And it's flagged red because 1 day, I guess, would be the threshold. It suggests that it may have been offline for quite some time. There's also the iPad friendly name, or in my case, not so friendly name, and I've actually left the name as this very long iPad 3.4 ECB blah 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 blah. I left it that way because we're actually going to demonstrate how to rename these devices later on in the webinar, because this is actually what you're going to see when you first enroll an iPad into AirWatch. They're going to come in with a really cryptic looking name, or a very non-friendly name, which may not be meaningful to you when you're looking at it. But we can actually rename it. But that is the device name as far as AirWatch is concerned. Not necessarily the name of it on the device when you go to settings, general, about, but that's the name that AirWatch is referring to it as. And we can change that so it doesn't seem so confusing when I'm looking at it. There's also the iPad model. So I can see here this one is a 4th gen 32 gigabyte black. It also shows me the version of iOS that it's currently on. And it also shows me down here on the right hand side the enrollment status. Let me just scroll over there. So this is showing me it's enrolled. You're probably always going to see that it's enrolled because in order for it to even be an AirWatch, it needs to be enrolled. But there are some cases if I were to, for example, wipe this device right now, it would switch from enrolled to not enrolled, and basically waiting for it to come back in to AirWatch. Then there's also details view. So I can switch over to details view. We don't see details view on the left hand side here, and that's sort of because it's hidden until I actually go into a specific device. Then it'll switch over to details view. But say I wanted to delve in and look at a particular iPad in details view so that I can see more details regarding the device. I can actually click that iPad, and it'll take me into details view, which we'll see will open up over here on the side. So now that's showing there. Now details view basically provides device level management, so tasks on an individual device. So we've shifted our focus from looking at all of our devices to now looking at just one particular device. So from here we immediately get jumped over into the summary tab, and as it implies, it's just sort of a summary breakdown of the device. Oh, I got a little spinning loading wheel here. The speed of AirWatch actually fluctuates, so in this case I just think it's not responding, but I think we can actually work around that. It looks like it's just failing to load a certain element. I can probably refresh the page, but I'm just going to go over summary view with that giant spinning wheel there, so please ignore that. It'll probably go away, or if not, I'll probably refresh the page and it would go away. But in the summary tab, we can see the apps. So for example, here under apps, it shows that I have 2 out of 2 installed, and those 2 apps that it's referring to means that I've created a rule or basically a list of apps that I want to be deployed to this iPad, and I've basically chosen 2 apps to be installed to this iPad, and it's saying out of those 2 apps that I've forced to enroll in, and be deployed to the iPad, all 2 of them have been installed. There is also the device info over here on the right hand side. So this sort of gives you more information regarding the device. I can scroll down. In this case, it's not an iPhone, so it doesn't really have a phone number. But it does show me the serial number, which is very helpful, especially when it comes time to rename your devices. You can match up your device names or your iPads with the serial number and then rename them accordingly. There is also the power status, so how much battery is remaining on the device, the storage capacity, so I got 26 gigabytes free out of 27, and the physical memory of the device, not really as worrisome as the other one, and available OS updates. So if this device wasn't on the latest, which I can see actually over here, it is 10.2, I would actually see that there would be an available OS update here for 10.2 if, say, for example, it was on 10.1. So summary tab just sort of gives you a brief overview of the device, more just for viewing for your own knowledge there. But I'm actually going to switch over to the apps tab, and we're going to take a look at those apps that it was referring to. See if I can get that spinning wheel to go away when I switch tabs here. So we were on the summary tab. It's still there. You know what? I'm going to do a full page refresh here. Give me 1 second. My apologies. It's just the spinning wheel won't go away. Just because it's a cloud service app, sometimes it's a little bit slow. Yeah, there we go. That cleared it out. Okay, so as we saw on the summary tab, there was 2 out of 2 apps showing installed. Now, iPads come with a bunch of default apps: FaceTime, Calendar, Maps, Clock, iTunes Store, iBooks, all kinds of stuff. So it's not referring to those 2 apps. What the 2 apps is referring to are the ones we see here. And these are basically showing that the apps that are installed that are not by default with the iPad, and ones that will be configured to show as being, or ones that we've configured to be installed to this device. So out of those 2, we have a rule somewhere in our AirWatch environment to install Outlook, and by default there is a rule or a group to install the AirWatch agent, which is a requirement obviously of being enrolled in AirWatch. So out of those 2, I can see that both 2 are installed. We got the green check mark showing me that they're installed. It shows me the version number of the app. So sometimes if you're concerned whether a certain app may be out of date, you can actually go in here and match up the version number of the app to see if it's the latest, and you could update it accordingly from here. And of course it shows the app size of the app here. I'm going to show you some of the more some of the actions you can do to the device. So right now we're looking at one particular iPad, as I said, in details view. We have actions that we can perform on this individual device. So I'm just going to show lock device. A lock device basically will force the device to go right away to the lock screen, and that can be seen up here. So for example, if I switch back over to my iPad, you can see right now it's not on the lock screen. I'm just on here, and if I wanted to force it to a lock screen, I can click that, and what it'll do is it'll basically lock down the device. So it'll force the device to be locked. So this may be useful in the case that your device may be lost. So say for example, if I couldn't find this iPad, or it's unaccounted for, maybe it's sitting in the drawer of somebody's desk, and I want the first person to pick it up to realize that this device is lost and to return it to me. I could create a little custom message here saying, I have not seen this device in quite some time. Please return to Mr. Silva in room 101, or something to that effect. And then I can even put a cell phone number as a contact for if they pick up the device and they want to be able to know who to contact regarding it with a phone number. And once I click send, what will happen is it'll actually take that device and it'll bring it right here to the lock screen. And if I try to, oh sorry, my apologies, why did that not work? Hang on a sec. Hello. Just gonna send that one more time. Well, that's a bad example. My apologies, everyone. It's supposed to take it to a lock screen, and then that way when somebody picks it up. Okay. I promise you it usually works. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Maybe I chose the wrong thing. Oh, my apologies. So the lock screen, I'm sorry. I've gotten a little off track here, but the lock screen will take an iPad from its active session. I'm not sure why it even required me to fill out all that information, but what it'll do is it'll take an iPad in its active session here, and it'll just force it to the lock screen. So I'm not sure what all this message here is for, because when I do that, it just basically puts it to the lock screen. But in this case, I don't really have a passcode on this device, so I can just, unlock it. But I guess if I had a passcode on the device, I could force the iPad from being, in use to at the lock screen and having to type in a passcode. The feature that I was actually getting confused with is lost mode, and because I kind of teased you on that, I'm just going to jump right into that one right now. So if I go under more actions here on the left hand side, there's an option here called lost mode. Where is it? Lost mode. Enable lost mode right here. It's kind of small font in the more actions menu, so you kind of really got to squint, but under the last option here, there is enable lost mode, and that's what I was referring to, that if the device is lost and you want somebody to bring it back to you, this is the feature you'd use. So if I click enable lost mode, again, sort of the same fields as we had before. There's the message, so this device is lost, please return. Oops. And I can put in my number and even a footnote. I'll just leave it blank, and then I can send that to the device. And now what'll happen, and this is what I thought was going to happen before. Here we go. So this device is now in lost mode, and essentially it's locked. I can't do anything on this device. You can't see it, but I'm pressing the home button. I'm trying to unlock it. I'm trying to swipe left or right. Nothing's happening. And the reason for that lost mode is just so that if somebody finds the device and rather than worrying about them, continue to use it, it's actually lost and I want it accounted for, I can put a message here saying to return it. And that device will be in this lost mode, or basically completely locked down, until it is returned. And once it is returned, the AirWatch administrator who had set this message can then go back into AirWatch and disable lost mode. So under more actions, it'll probably still show enable lost mode. Still shows enable lost mode, and that's because the page hasn't refreshed. But what will happen if I refresh the page is that enable lost mode will turn to disable lost mode. So in the case of, the example that I was given, if somebody had picked up this device after it being lost and they return it to me, and now I want to go back and put it back into regular student use or classroom use, I would have to disable lost mode. So I can go into more actions here again, and what I'll see is that enable lost mode is now disable lost mode. So then I can disable lost mode. Oop, lost mode disabled successfully. And if I go back to my iPad, turn it on, it'll actually say this iPad has been found. In theory. Oh, it's not loading. Strange. Well, you can't see it right now, I think, because what happened is once I disabled lost mode, it disconnected from the software that I have here. But on the iPad itself, right now, it says the iPad was located, and essentially I can unlock it and continue using it. So I'll carry on with under more actions here. There's some other actions we can perform on the device. You may want to use edit device, and this is what I was referring to earlier, where the devices come in with a very unfriendly name, and that name essentially will look very cryptic looking. And if I want to rename the device so that it's more meaningful to me, because as we saw earlier, let's take a look at this device for example. This device name is actually shown up right here at the top, and it's very cryptic. It's iPad 34 ECBCB blah 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 blah. When I come into AirWatch, if I see that device name, it's not going to mean much to me. So we want to rename our devices to something meaningful, and we can actually do that from the More Actions menu here. So I'll go to More Actions and then Edit Device. And what will happen is I'll bring up this menu here where I can change the name of the iPad. And the name of the iPad is important because when you're in AirWatch, you're going to be looking at all your iPads. And you may want to rename your devices in a way that's meaningful to your school. So if, for example, you have all your iPads labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, or maybe they're all part of a cart, you may want to name it so that it has a meaningful name to you, so that when you come into the AirWatch console and you see your iPads, you can look at that iPad and know exactly which one it is within your school. So in this case, iPad 3.4 means nothing to me. I'm going to just use our real-world scenario here and rename the device. I'm going to call it library cart. Yeah, there we go, library cart. So maybe this iPad is located in a cart in the library, and maybe it has a sticker on it, and it's labeled number 2. So I'd probably want to name it something to that effect, like library cart 2, so that way when I come into AirWatch console, and then I want to deploy apps to it, when I look at the device based on their name, what I'll see is that a more meaningful name. So especially, yeah, just like Tracy said here, naming is very important when you have a lot, because when you're looking at them, if they're not renamed to something meaningful, if they're just iPad, like literally just iPad, that's not going to mean anything to you, especially when it comes time to push apps to it. You want it to be able to push apps to them based on their role. So say, for example, you have iPads used for grade 1s and one for grade 2s, grade 3. You may want to call it grade 3 iPad and then a unique number to it. So that way when it comes time to push an app, I sound like a broken record player, but I think you get the idea, is you want to name it something that's meaningful to you or your school, a school naming convention, if you will. There's also a little flag here that says set friendly name as device name. I'm just going to actually go back to my iPad here and show you an example, which doesn't seem to be connecting. Bear with me one second. I think my app's a little messed up. I'm just going to relaunch that. One moment. This is the problem with webinars, is that technology sometimes are just so unreliable. I just want to get it connected because I think it's important to see the device side of things too. It's not connecting. Bear with me one moment. Oh, that's why it's on the wrong wireless network. Our Wi-Fi is a little bit flaky in this building. We're at One Civic Center, and it's basically this giant concrete building where I don't think the Wi-Fi actually penetrates through the bunker walls here. But it looks like it's connected now, so let me just join it back to my software here. And there we go. Okay, phew. Ooh, that would have ruined the webinar. So carrying on with what I was saying is that the device name, let me just move that out of the way. Oops. The device name on the iPad, under Settings, General, and then About, over here on the top, will have a name set by default. In this case, I think I logged into this iPad using my employee number, and that's where it inherited the device name from. And that's why it's showing 163809. That's my employee number, and showing that iPad. So it automatically generated that iPad. But if I'm going to rename the device in AirWatch, I'm probably going to want to rename the device on the device itself. So there's basically a one-for-one match. And that's what that flag is that we saw here. So if I switch back to AirWatch here, and there's that flag here that says set friendly name as device name. If I check that off, it's going to turn this iPad from that 163809's iPad to library cart number 2. I'm going to go ahead and click save because I think you guys get the point by now. If I click save, it will now rename the device. It's still showing iPad 3.4 ECBBB up here at the top. As soon as it refreshes, the name should change. There we go. Library iPad cart 2. And if I switch back over to my device, and I go into Settings, and General, and then About, we can see here that the device is now named Library Cart number 2. So, again, very important to rename your devices so that way when you are looking at AirWatch console, it's meaningful to you. So that was renaming the device. We're going to actually now show. Lost my. Under more actions, there's some more stuff that we need to cover here. There is clear passcode. So as I mentioned earlier, devices do not have a passcode by default. We disabled that feature. But if a passcode was set on the device, you could clear it from here. So rather than, before, if you guess it too many times, it disables and locks out the iPad, you can actually clear the passcode on the device. I think now actually would be a good time to show you some things on the iPad side of things because it'll sort of go hand in hand with the iPads. So on the iPad itself, as I said, there is no ability to set a passcode. So if I go into settings, on the left-hand side, there's nothing here showing to set a passcode. And that's because this iPad actually is in, I guess I'd call it student mode. It's in a mode that cannot be altered by a student. There's no way to set a passcode. If I go back to the home screen, there's actually no app store, so students can't add apps. So this is sort of in a lockdown state, and this was the default behavior of AirWatch that I was referring to. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't open up those things. And actually how we'll do that is we're going to log into the agent. So there's an app here on the iPad itself called the agent. And this is the app that actually is forcing it to communicate with AirWatch. This is the app side of the device. And if I launch the agent, it'll bring me to a login screen. And on this login screen, I can type in my employee number and password. And unlike the AirWatch console, I don't need to do the TDSB prefix. I can literally just type in my employee number and password. So I'm just going to do that now. And because I am a staff member, and this applies to all staff members, all teachers, all principals. If you are TDSB staff and you type in your employee number and password into the AirWatch console, it knows that you're a privileged user, and it'll actually unlock all those features that are disabled by AirWatch by default. I actually did this on a previous webinar where I started typing in my password, and then I realized I had to change it afterwards. So I'm actually going to disconnect from the software here for a sec, just until I type in my password. So bear with me here. Okay. So we're all logged in. I'm going to join back in on the webinar. There we go. Yeah, sorry about that. I just had to minimize the screen because last time I typed in my password and then it was on the YouTube video and people could go back and literally see the keys that I was typing in for my password. Not good security practice. So I've disconnected and reconnected, but what I did is I typed in my employee number and then my password, and then it takes me to this sort of screen here, and it just gives me a breakdown of the device. It's got the name, iPad, model number, says it's enrolled. Really not a lot in the agent itself, but just the act of signing in to the agent has unlocked the features for me that I was referring to, such as the passcode, the ability to use the App Store. So if I hit the home screen now that I've logged in, it'll take me right back to the home screen, and lo and behold, look at that, the App Store is now available. So this is sort of like a circumvention to AirWatch if you wanted to, for example, add one particular app on this iPad, but you didn't want to go into the AirWatch console. You could still go into the App Store and you could still download an app. Of course, it'll only be downloaded to this one particular iPad, and it would require an Apple ID. So kind of gets away from the whole thing that we were trying to accomplish with AirWatch, but that is still an option that is there. And also, one of the settings that it unlocks is also on the side here, the passcode. And like I said, by default, that setting wasn't even available there before I had signed in the AirWatch console, and that was to prevent students from turning on the passcode. But now that I've done that, I've signed into the AirWatch agent, it now knows that I'm a staff member and I'm a privileged user, and it's okay to open up these features to me. Right now, we have disabled passcodes. If your school, for whatever reason, wants to have passcodes on the devices, that actually have to be submitted through a ticket by calling us at the client service desk, and we could turn that on for your school as an option. More often than not, I don't think people want that because the iPads are more for just swapping hands really quickly, and passcode probably isn't going to prevent students from getting in and out. But let's say, for example, I did turn that passcode on. I'm going to set it to 1, 2, 3, 4. I like it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I go back to the home screen. So I've actually put a passcode on this device, and I did that once again by logging into the AirWatch agent over here. And when I logged into the AirWatch agent, it opened up those features for me. Now say, for example, I want to hand this back to the students. I no longer want the App Store there, and I don't want them to set passcodes. I'm done doing what I had to do. If I'm ready to give this back into the hands of a student, I want all that stuff that I just enabled turned off again. You merely have to click the logout button here at the bottom of the agent. So if I click logout, it'll actually take me back to the logout screen. It says, "Do you sure want to log off?" Of course I am. That's why I did it. And it'll bring me right back to the login screen of the AirWatch agent. And this is sort of what we saw when we first came in here. So now it's back in student mode because I've logged out. So if I go to the home screen, I can see here that that App Store, once again, is now gone. And then if I go into settings, that passcode feature is now gone as well. It used to be somewhere between here. And of course, if I lock the device, because I put a passcode on it, now the device has a passcode on it. And I was only able to do that because, oh, sorry, why didn't the passcode set? Oh, live webinars. This always happens. Hypothetically, if I did put a passcode on the device, I could clear it. I'm surprised that didn't work. Maybe some sort of setting that was recently changed that I'm not aware of. Yeah, there's no passcode. Okay, I'm going to have to take that away. But the general idea here is that if there was a passcode set on the device, you could unlock it from AirWatch. I think when I changed the setting to put the passcode in, I think logging out of the agent may have cleared the passcode, which is something I didn't know about, and I'm going to have to go back and take a look at that. But if your school did, for example, put in that special request to have passcodes on the device, you could clear the passcode under the More Actions menu in AirWatch right here. There's also Device Wipe under More Actions. I'm not going to show that just because I need this iPad for the rest of the webinar, but over here there's Device Wipe, and that is, as it implies, will force the device to be wiped. So say, for example, I want to start fresh, I put a bunch of apps on it, or there's a lot of content on it, and I want to go back to its roots, I could use the Device Wipe to clear the iPad back to its vanilla settings. And as I mentioned earlier with that 4-digit PIN code, if I click Device Wipe, this is one of those actions that requires my PIN code. So I see here it sort of says, you are about to perform a device wipe action. Please review all the information below, blah, blah, blah. It shows you the iPad details. And then there's that magical 4-digit security PIN number. If I were to type in my PIN number, it would right away start wiping it. I'm not going to type it in, but the second I type in that last digit, what would happen is it would actually fire off the device wipe. I intentionally typed in a bad PIN number because I did not want this device to be wiped. But just to get you an idea of how you would go about wiping a device. And unlike before, you'd have to use iTunes to wipe a device. Very cumbersome. Right here, it's just a few clicks and a type in of your PIN code, and that device will go right back to its vanilla settings. Also under More Actions is the iOS update over here. The iOS update, as I showed earlier, if your device is not on the latest and greatest version of iOS, let's say it's on 10.1, you can trigger the iOS update for your device from here. So if I spot a device that is not up to date, I could just go into here, More Actions, iOS update, and it'll force that device to update. In this case, I'm on the latest version, so it'll have no effect if I do it now. There was a lost mode, I already showed that. And I guess that's really the gist of it as far as this section goes. There is a lot more in here, but this product is pretty big, and there's always a lot to discover, but we only have so much time in the webinar. But I think those are the ones that you will find yourself using the most at your school. So I'm actually going to switch over now to apps and books. So as I said earlier, we were on devices, and now we're switching to our apps and books. So that was dealing with all of our devices. We saw a list of our devices, and then we went into an individual device. We renamed it. We performed some actions on it. We were able to lock it. But now we're going to go into apps and books. So now this is more probably what you guys will be using AirWatch for in the majority of the cases, is deploying apps to your devices en masse. So right away when I click apps and books, it takes me to, under this menu here, applications and list view. And what I see here is a list of apps. Now, as you can see, that's not very helpful because they're all showing unknown. But what we're actually seeing here when we first come in apps and books is a list of all the apps in the Toronto District School Board, even some custom ones, even some testing things that we're being playing around with when we were introducing the product. So these apps that I see here right away are not necessarily the apps that are for my school. A lot of unknown things here. I'm not entirely sure what these are all about, to be honest with you. But to find out the apps that are applicable to my school, the ones that I've requested, I need to filter out this list when I come in here. And we're going to be on the Purchase tab. Even though it says Purchased, it's a little bit misleading, but in this case, Purchased also contains your free apps. So from Purchased tab, I can see there's a search list over here on the left-hand side, and this is how I'm going to filter out my apps. There's two ways I can filter out my apps, really. I can either type in the 4-digit trillium number of my school, or I can type in the name of my school. In the case of the test environment that we have here, my school, the 4-digit trillium number is 9991, and I hit enter. And what will happen is it'll take all the apps in AirWatch and it'll filter out the ones that are specifically meant for me. So now I can see all the apps here filtered by 9991, and you can see it's even highlighted there. These are all the apps that I submitted through the app request form. And as I said, you can also search by the school name. So let's say I didn't want to use the 4-digit trillium number. I don't know what it is. You can always search the school name. I'll type in test school because this is my school, test school. But in any other case, you could search for whatever school you want. But you'd probably only want to see the ones that apply to you. You can't take an app that doesn't apply to you and apply it to someone else. So I've searched it and I've filtered it. Again, this is the same list. It's showing me all the apps that apply to my school environment. These are all here because I submitted the app request form. The app request form, there is a link to it in the bottom of the video. There's also a link to it from our ServiceIT MDM website, as long as it's also in the documentation of AirWatch. We have like an instructional PDF that basically goes over majority of the tasks that I'm covering right now, and one of them is there's a section on deploying an app, and one of the things that first needs to happen before you even deploy apps to your iPads is you need to submit an app request form, because these apps don't just come in here automatically. What happens is you submit the app request form, and in 24 to 72 hours it gets added into AirWatch and you'll be notified via email. I'll actually just show you the app request form here because I think it's good to know. Bear with me one moment while I pull it up. I'm just going to escape my PowerPoint here. So here's the app request form. As of right now, there are some things that need to be changed, and they are on our list of things to do. The app request form currently is limited to 3 apps at a time. And there's also some fields here that are mandatory that they're going to change to not mandatory when you're requesting a free app, for example. So I would type in my school name, the requester name, my role, my email address, who the principal is. And then here are the 2 fields I was referring to, is the cost center and general ledger. That's all SAP information you would use when you're ordering a paid app. Because this same form is also used for free apps, these fields probably shouldn't be mandatory, especially if I'm requesting a free app. So they are working on making those non-mandatory fields, but for now they are mandatory. If you're ordering a free app, not entirely sure whether you need to even fill in that information. You could probably make up the information. And then also, as I said, there is only 3 apps I can add at a time. So you can see app title, app link, quantity, and then of course app title, app link, quantity, app title, app link, quantity, and then submit. So that every time, if I wanted to set up my AirWatch environment with a bunch of apps, I can only do 3 at a time with this current app request form. It is on our list of things to do, and it will be updated so that we can have an infinite amount. You can just sort of use one form to submit all the apps you want to show in your AirWatch environment. But for your knowledge, that this is how those apps got in there, is that they were submitted through the app request form. Switch back to AirWatch. So that, and of course that includes free and paid apps. So a lot of these apps here are free, but they still had to go through the app request form before they were showing in AirWatch here. So this is a list of my apps. These are all the apps that are now manageable by AirWatch, and I can use AirWatch to deploy these apps to the iPads. I'm going to demo the actual deploying of an app to an iPad in a few moments, but for now I just wanted to show you the look and feel of the app section here and how to filter out my apps. Very important that you search for your school name or your school's 4-digit trillium number in the top right hand corner to filter out those apps for you. Also, I should mention, and here's a little hidden thing that kind of occurs in AirWatch, is when you submit your app request form, and then you get a notification saying, oh, the app's ready to go, and then you go into AirWatch, and you filter out by your school, and yet you still don't see the app here, there is a little thing here called Sync Assets, and it's a kind of a hidden button, but the Sync Assets will force AirWatch to refresh itself. In a sense, it'll show you that it needs to, it'll reach out and pull out those apps again. So I can press that button and basically it'll force AirWatch to check all of its apps again, and then it'll reflect the date and time here with the last time I pressed it when I refresh it, and that'll pull in a fresh set of apps or any changes to the apps that have been made there. So more often than not, that solves that issue when you see that there's no apps there. There's also the web tab up here. So under the web tab, it'll show you the web clips, and I briefly mentioned that at the beginning. And web clips essentially are shortcuts. So they'll appear like an app on your iPad, but they're actually just shortcuts to a web browser. So if I go back to my iPad, here's an example of a web clip right here, this ServiceIT one that I see here. That's not an app. If I click it, what'll happen is it'll take me to a hyperlink. It'll take me to a URL. In this case, it's asked me to log in because I got to log in to get to ServiceIT. But that's what that did. It opened up Safari and took me right to ServiceIT. So not an app, but a web clip, similar to like a bookmark. For everyone who needs to leave, I'm sorry that apparently timing has always been an issue with this webinar. This video will be recorded, so you have the link. Feel free to go back and watch it if you're rushing out of here. So for web clips, they're all stored under the web tab here. Purchased is your apps, web is your web clips. Now I'm going to brush over here to groups and settings. Groups and settings is where we will create our smart groups, and these smart groups are what we use for grouping our iPads together so that we can apply those apps and apply those web clips to a whole suite of our iPads at a given time. So if I go to the groups and settings on the left hand side here, there's a submenu here called groups, and I want to expand the groups and go to assignment groups, not organization groups, but assignment groups. And from assignment groups, it'll show me a list of all my smart groups that are available in AirWatch. In this case, there's the default ones. This is a group that that groups all my iPads together. This one groups all my Android apps together. And when I want to deploy an app, I need a smart group in order to deploy an app. So at this moment, I'm actually going to demonstrate the creation of a smart group, as well as we're going to take that same smart group that we just created and apply apps to them so that we can now deploy apps to the iPad. So to add a smart group, we're going to click the Add Smart Group button right here at the top. And what that'll do is it'll take me to a page that will allow me to create a new smart group right here at the top, as we can see. Now there's two options here. It says choose type, select criteria, and select devices or users right here. Choose type, select criteria, select devices and users. We're going to be using select devices or users. Regarding the question, how do we make a web clip, I'm going to be showing you how to make a web clip. I'm just going through the creation of a smart group, and then with the smart group, we'll add an app and a web clip to the smart group. So, but for now, we're creating the smart group. So we have the create smart group window, and it says create new smart group. Select criteria is based on criteria of the iPad. So say, for example, it'll show you, I could create a smart group based on the model of the iPad or the operating system. So say, for example, Apple iOS is a certain version. I don't think schools will be using this, to be honest, because you usually don't apply smart groups based on the conditions of the iPad. What you're going to be using is select devices and users, and this will allow you to manually select iPads and put them into groups. So I would avoid select criteria altogether, because you're probably not going to have rules for smart groups. You're going to have your own custom list. You want those iPads in that list. So I'm going to demonstrate that. We're going to switch over to select devices or users here. And this is where I will create, this is where I'm actually going to pick the devices for my group. But before I pick the devices for my group, I'm going to rename it something. So in the top right hand corner, it shows name here. And this is where I'll give my smart group a name. And you probably, again, want to do something that's meaningful to you. So in the case of our test here where I have my iPad named library cart, and it's iPad number 2, maybe I'd want to create a smart group that applies to all iPads in my library cart. So that would be sort of a good name to give a smart group, is you want to give it a name that applies to the group of iPads. So I'm going to call it library cart. So this smart group will contain all my iPads that belong to that library cart. Now I want to choose my devices and move them into the library cart smart group. And we do that over here on the left hand side under devices. It shows here enter a friendly name, and what will happen is once I touch my mouse there, it's going to bring up a list of all the iPads in my environment. So I can see here there's that Android device, there's that iPad that I didn't rename, and here we go, library cart number 2. Now this is why we said earlier that it's very important to name your devices. Say I had gotten here and I hadn't named any of my devices, and it comes time to add them to my special group that I want, so in this case the library cart. If I hadn't named it something like library cart number 2, I probably would be looking at this list and have no idea which one belongs to the library cart. So for example, this iPad 41A91 blah 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 blah. If I'm looking at that, I don't know which iPad that is. That's a very unfriendly name that I have no idea where it is or whose it is or how it even got there. So because I named my device appropriately, library cart number 2, and because I'm creating a group, library cart, well that tells me that's probably one of the devices that I want to add. So I'm going to select that one, and that's the one that I have with me here. So once I've selected it, I'm going to click the add button, and it'll move over from this side over to this side. And now we see that it's over here. So these are the devices on the right hand side that are going to be in the smart group, and I could choose more obviously on the left hand side by clicking here, and it'll bring up that list, and you just keep adding and adding and adding and adding. But once you have them all in there, the ones that you want, in this case I only have the one device to work with, so I'm just going to do that one. You have all of them showing as your devices in the smart group. We can go ahead and click save. And what I'm going to see here is a new smart group created, and there it is. Library cart and group type, it is a smart group, and it shows devices 1. So that kind of already gives me, just by looking at the screen, I can see how many devices are in that smart group, and that's kind of useful for making sure that you have the appropriate amount there. So if you had 22 in the cart and you saw that it showed 21, well, you're probably missing 1 in there. So it sort of gives you a high-level overview of the smart group. But it is important to create that smart group, because when it comes time to deploy an app, we'll be applying it to the smart group. So apps will get deployed to smart groups, and then smart groups contain devices, and devices will get the apps. So I'm going to switch over to apps and books back again, because now we're going to deploy an app to our new library cart smart group. So I click over here on apps and books, and it takes me over to the purchase tab. And of course, when I first come in here and I'm looking at the purchase tab, always need to go to the search list and search for my device. So I'm going to type in 9991, or actually probably more appropriately I'll do the test school. So I search for the test school. It's going to bring up all my apps. And now I'm going to take one of my apps and apply it to that smart group. I'm going to use we'll see, Google Sheets here. So to add Google Sheets, what we do is if this is the app that I want deployed there, I will click the button over here. It's very tiny and a little bit hidden, but this one with the pencil on the clipboard is the button that we use to bring up the edit assignment window, and that's how we'll take this. Ooh, everything's moving. It'll bring up this window here, and this is where we take that app and we will apply it to a smart group. Is in this window here for edit assignment. In this case, I actually see something right here. It shows enable device assignment. Now, when you first come into AirWatch and you first have an app appear in AirWatch, all apps are going to have this enable device assignment button here, and this button has to be pressed. If you do not press this button, AirWatch basically doesn't have control over that app. So if you ever come in here and you go to assign an app and you see enable device assignment, always press it. For this case, just because I like to use this for demonstrating in the webinar, that button, I'm not going to press it, because once you press it once, you never have to press it again. As far as the technical details of why I need to press it, a lot of information that I'm not entirely sure of myself, but you always want to press that Enable Device Assignment button here. And of course, once you press it, you'll never have to press it again, and you'll be able to deploy apps with that one. I'm just going to cancel out of that because now that I've seen that button, I'm just going to use another one to demonstrate. So I'm going to use, let's try CP24. Again, I click my Edit Assignment button there. Sorry, everything's moving. Every time I turn on this little highlight feature for the mouse, it seems to shift everything around. And I'm going to press that, and what's going to happen is it's going to bring, oh, this one also has Enable Device Assignment. My apologies. I'm going to find one that doesn't. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use that one, just so you guys can get an idea. So with Enable Device Assignment, of course, there's that blue button. I press it. It says, are you sure you want to enable device-based license assignment, blah, blah, blah. Hit OK. And now that blue button is gone. I will never have to do that again. I press it once, device assignment is enabled for this app, and I can use this app going forward without having to worry about that. But now I'm in here, and now I want to assign it to a particular group. What I'll do is it'll show over here, add assignment by, and then I'll say license codes by smart group. And if I click that link, sorry, everything shifts every time I hit the highlight key. I'm going to try to avoid using that highlight key. What I'll see is this little section here that comes up to select a smart group. And if I press my mouse into that text field, it'll actually bring up a list of smart groups in my environment. And the one that I created earlier, we can see here, is actually that library cart. So now that I have my one iPad in that group, I'm going to apply this app to that group. So I select the library cart smart group, and now I know that when I go to save this app, it's going to push out to the library cart group. Before we do that, though, there is an important thing to note, is the allocated here. So allocated needs to be adjusted. And basically what happens is when you request a free app, we give you 500 licenses. So even though it's a free app and technically there shouldn't be any licenses, just with the way that AirWatch works, we need to give a license count even for free apps. So that's why we swing for the fences when we do a free app. You'll see that all of your apps will have a license count of 500 or something high. In this case, I see here this one has total licenses of 100, and there's 100 unallocated licenses. And what I need to do when I'm applying this to a particular group, oh, what happened here? My apologies, something is going wrong with the browser. Just going to refresh the page here. Bear with me one moment. Oh, I lost everything. Hang on, we'll search Test School again, and we'll find our CP24 app again, and then we'll go back to Enable Device Assignment. There we go, CP24, again, Edit Assignment. That, you know, unfortunately guys, I'm gonna stop pressing that button that kind of highlights the section of the screen where my cursor is, just because I think it's shifting things around. It's an F10 key, so I think it messes with the browser. So I'm just gonna stop doing that. Hopefully my mouse isn't too small and you can actually see where it is that I'm clicking. But I'm clicking the Edit Assignment button here, and and the first time that I came in here, I had the Enable Device Assignment, and I said I never had to press it again. The reason I have to press it again is because I didn't click Save. So later on down the road, if you press Save, the changes won't stick. Anyways, so you highlight your mouse over Add Assignment By, and you choose License Code by Smart Group. That's what we did earlier. And once again, we select here, and we choose our Smart Group, in this case, the library cart. And again, the allocated section here I said is important, and the reason is that we need to choose how many licenses are available for this smart group. So in the case of free apps, like I said, we usually swing for the fences. You'll see that there's a high license count. In this case, there's 100. In most free apps, you'll see there's 500 licenses. You don't really have to worry about the license count because really it's a free app, so it's not like there's no harm for us to go back and actually edit that. But we usually give a high license count so you don't have to worry about it. But what will happen is that when I look at the license count, in this case it shows that there's 100 licenses. I want to allocate the amount of licenses that are required for that device. And this screen actually sort of breaks it down so it makes it a little bit easier for you. In this case, in my library cart assignment group, it shows that device is 1. So I need to allocate at least 1 license for that smart group. Because out of that 100, I need 1 to apply to that device. If, for example, this smart group or my library cart, later on down the road, I add 10 more devices to it, then you may want to come back in here and change the allocation field. Or what you can do preemptively ahead of time is, if I know I have 100 licenses and I don't see myself, and maybe I don't even have 100 iPads, and I want to assign a higher amount of licenses to the smart group, I would give it something higher so that in the future when I go to add a device to the smart group, I don't have to worry about coming back in here and changing the license allocation. So I'm going to put 50 because I have 100, and any iPad I get will probably, I'm definitely not going to get 50 more iPads. So it's safe to put up 50 in here, and then say down the road if I get 20 more iPads, I don't have to worry about coming back in here and changing that allocation amount. So always go a little bit higher than what you intend when you're allocating the licenses for free apps. Paid apps, a little bit more different. When you're dealing with paid apps, you only have 20 or so licenses that you purchased, and you want it to be precise, obviously, in that case. But while we're here, scroll down, it'll show there's some more details we want to change. In this case, assignment type is showing auto and on demand. We're going to leave it as auto. Auto says that this app will be pushed out right away. So when I change that to auto, or in this case it stays as auto by default, it means the second I hit save, it's going to push this app out to the device. You also probably not going to want to touch any of the other checkboxes here. Remove on unenroll may be one that you want to do if you have a paid app, for example. So if you want that app to be removed, if say that device is ever going to be unenrolled, you might want to have that checked. It's checked off by default, so don't really worry too much about that. But if say I wanted to change it to on demand basically makes it an optional app. So it doesn't push it out right away in the same way that auto does. Auto will push the app out right away as fast as possible. On demand will actually put it in the catalog. So if I go over back to my device, there's a section here right here that shows catalog, and that catalog shows optional apps. So if I go into the catalog, it'll basically give me a list of apps that I could potentially download. In this case, there's the Outlook and the AirWatch. If I chose on demand for this app, it'll show up in the catalog, and it'll basically make the app optional. So the app doesn't push out right away, but the user has the option of installing that app. But in this case, most instances, you're probably just going to want auto. You want those apps on there. So I'm going to leave it as auto. And I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now, what should happen, because I had it set to auto, is that app should actually push out right away. So if I switch back over here, and I go to my home screen, sometimes it does take a bit. When you're pushing apps out to iPads, it could take a little bit. And it really all depends on the network speed. In this case, I don't see it here. Usually it's pretty good about it. In this case, I don't see it, but the assignment and everything was done right. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave it there, and when it does deploy, I'll switch back and I'll show you guys. But that was the deploying of an app. We can do the same thing with a web clip. So we do the web clips by switching over to the web tab here. And I'm going to go to add application. Bear with me one moment here. Sorry, something's going on with the iPads. Hang on. Sorry about that, folks. Something was going on weird here. We had a technical issue with the stream. But, sorry, I'll just quickly go back to the iPad so you can see that that app is actually now deploying. So if I look at the iPad here, that CP24 app that we applied is showing loading, and as we can see, it's going to install. So again, based on the network speed at your school, or how many iPads you're deploying an app to at a given time, it may be a little bit slower. You may have to wait a little bit before they actually start to push down, because it is really all dependent on the network speed. So if you want to deploy a bunch of apps to iPads, sometimes it's good to do it probably at the end of the day of school when the network traffic's a little bit low. But eventually they do make their way down. So that's the deploying of an app, and we'll just let that install. And I'm just going to go back to the web tab here and show you how to deploy a web clip. Sorry, I'm going to click cancel just because I want to start again, because I think that little pause there probably made things difficult to follow. So we saw the deploying of an app through the Purchase tab. If we switch over to the Web tab, this is where we do our web clips. And the button that we press is Add Application. I promised myself I wouldn't press that button anymore. My apologies. But if I press the Add Application here, what'll come up is a window here. It says Add Application. It's a little bit misleading. In this case, it says Add Application, but really it's a web clip for us. We need to choose the platform type. In this case, we're predominantly working with iPads for now. So we'll want to choose Apple iOS. And then we hit Continue. And now we're going to set some information for our web clip. We're going to begin with the name. So for this example, well, let's see, we got a library cart and we got a library smart group. I'm going to create a virtual library hyperlink. So I'm going to type in virtual library and the URL. Funny enough, I don't remember the URL for the virtual library. Virtual library. TSP Web. This is a good time to look for that. Bear with me one moment. Your virtual center. That's not it. Just for the sake of time, I don't want to waste your time. I'm just going to use TDSP Web. So I'm going to take the link here for http://TDSP Web, and that's what we're going to put in there. So that URL is where the link is going to go for your web clip. It says virtual library. I don't have the link for the virtual library. I apologize. But I'm going to put TDSP Web in for now, and you're just going to have to trust me that if I put in the virtual library, it would work. But the URL for the address that you want that web clip to apply to, you put it in the URL field. So in this case, I'm just going to put TDSP Web. You can give it a description if you want. It's not really necessary. The description won't show anywhere. Or I guess if you want it, so if you're looking at the web clip screen and you want to have a brief description of where that web clip goes, you could fill in some description here, like this goes to TDSP Web, something to that effect. Not really too important. Now images. The images tab at the top here. This image is what is going to be the icon for that app. So if I choose click or drag files here, it'll open up a new window to browse for a file. And I'm going to choose a picture that will appear as the app. In this case, virtual library was the one we were going to use for this example. And once I hit open, so when I deploy this to my iPad, the virtual library, this is what the icon is going to look like for the web clip. And then we go over to assignment. So we've staged everything else. We got the name, the URL, and the image. Now we need to apply this web clip to a particular smart group. And similarly to how we did with the app, in the assigned group field here, the second we press our mouse here, it'll bring up a list of all of our smart groups. The one we created is library cart, so I'm going to select that one. And of course, it gave me the opportunity to add more, so you can just keep infinitesimally adding more and more. In this case, we're only going to apply it to one. Exclusions, we're going to leave it by default. Do not worry about what that means. Push mode, very similar to how it works with the apps. There's on-demand and auto. On-demand, once again, will put it in the catalog, and auto will automatically push that out to the device right away. In our case, we want it to go to that device right away. We don't want it optional. We want it to be on all the iPads and enforced to be on the iPads. We're going to choose auto. There's some more features down here under advanced that are kind of tucked away. We can click the advanced icon here and that'll expand it. There's some options here for removable, which means can I remove this web clip? We probably don't want that, so I'm going to leave it. I'm going to switch that over to no. You could leave it as yes if you don't really too much care about whether the that web clip gets removed, but most instances you're probably not going to want it to move. You want that hyperlink there for a reason. And then full screen, that'll be a matter of whether the hyperlink will open up in full screen where you don't see the address bar at the top and the back button and the home button when it opens up in Safari on the device. In this case, I'm going to leave it as no because I'm not too particular about whether that's going to happen. And with that, I'm going to click Save and Publish. We're going to get one more screen, just sort of going over all the devices it's going to be applied to. We're going to hit Publish again, and as you can see, it's got my library cart number 2. And I click Publish. And what's going to happen, again, all dependent on network speed, I should see that web clip appear. And there it is, the virtual library. Now the virtual library pushed out much faster than the app because the app actually had to go out and download. The virtual library is literally just a hyperlink, so it pushed out right away. And of course, if I click the virtual library, what should happen is it'll open up Safari and take me, as we can see, to TDSB Web. It's asking me for employee number and password, but I'm not going to bother with that. And that is how you create a web clip. Tracy, did that make sense for you? Just want to be sure about that before I proceed, because I know you seemed interested in the web clip part of that. Maybe she left. Moving on. Now that we've added an app and we've added a web clip, we're gonna demonstrate how to remove an app, and it's sort of working backwards with how we did it. So we first created a smart group, we added our devices to the smart group, and then we applied an app to the smart group. If I want to remove an app from a whole bunch of iPads at once, I no longer have a need for this app, for example. We just sort of do the steps backwards. So I'm going to go back over to my Purchase tab, and we're going to remove that CP24 app that I just put on to the iPad. So I move over to Purchased, and like I always do when I come here, I search my school name, in this case Test School. And then I find the app that I want to remove, and right there, CP24. And I go back into Edit Assignment. And as before, we actually put the smart group here, and that's what allocated it to the smart group. Now we want to remove it. So how we remove the app is actually just by removing this smart group, and how we do that is using this little X button here on the right-hand side, and that will remove the association of this app from that smart group. So by doing that, it'll ask me deleting the assignment will uninstall the application from all devices belonging to the assigned smart group. That's what we want. I'm going to click OK. And now there's no more assignments for this app. So if I click Save, what it should do is every one that it was applied to before in that smart group should now be removed. And of course, if I switch back over to my iPad and go over here, I can see that the CP24 app is now gone. So with that all in mind, we added a smart group, we added an app to a smart group, we added a web clip to a smart group, and of course, lastly, we removed the app from the smart group. I'm not sure how many people are still watching this webinar now because we did kind of way overstay our welcome. Sorry about that if you guys had to run. Of course, everything that is recorded here is going to be available afterwards using the same link. But if I go back here, I guess now would be a good time to talk about the support. You can always go to the ServiceIT MDM website. The link is right there. It is also in the description of the video. And of course, if you have any questions or you're having any problems with AirWatch or just your iPads in general, Wi-Fi connectivity, feel free to contact us. 416-395-4357 or help, and we're option 5. And given that that is the end of all our demonstrations, I know it's a little bit late. I apologize, guys. But if you have any questions right now, feel free to ask them in the chat. If you still have time to stick around, I'll stick around. I'll go through all your questions with you. And yeah, so feel free to fire away in the chat. if there's anything. Okay, so I think I think everyone's probably gone by now. Once again, I apologize, everyone. That was the AirWatch webinar. You can always go back and watch it if you wanted to go back and review it. I know it's a little bit lengthy. Every webinar that we record is available on our channel, and you can always go back and watch it again. So with that, I will sign off if there is no more questions, unless I'm not live here. I'm not seeing any activity in the chat, so I'm just going to do one last call for questions. Anything you want me to go over? Okay. All right, so with that, thank you everyone who is still here. I really appreciate you guys sticking around. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to contact us at the client service desk, and we'll be able to go over that with you. You can always go back and watch this webinar if you need to. And thank you very much. Again, I apologize for kind of going a little bit long on this webinar. We're still a little bit new to this whole webinar thing, so we're going to work on shaving it down or making it more condensed for you guys. You will receive a survey at the end of the webinar that'll ask you for some feedback. Please give us as much feedback as possible. Be as harsh as you want. We can take it. We can handle it. But we do need to know what it is that you guys expected, wanted from this webinar, and then we can adjust it accordingly for future webinars. And if you always, again, if I said if on our YouTube channel, you can always go back and watch this webinar and future webinars. So if you didn't like this one and you want to watch one in the future, those will all be posted on our TDSB CSD TDSB channel here that's available. So thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon, and thank you for attending this webinar. With that, I will be signing off now. Goodbye.